Welcome to tonight's Ordinary Meeting of Council for the 8th of May 2024. Nala Kadich Wajak Mort Kain Kadak Nija Walilat Buja. We're Jenang Wajak Kadijin, we're Nyiting Bula Yeye. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walilup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. The meeting's being recorded and streamed live online, so visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in that recording. Councillor Thompson is on leave of absence. Councillor Van Dawson has an apology for tonight. Councillor Williamson Wong is requesting a leave of absence from 25th of May to 5th of June inclusive. So I'll get a mover for that one. Councillor Sullivan is seconded by Councillor Lang. All those in favour? Yep, and that's unanimous. And any other leaves of absence requests? Nope. All right, do we have any disclosures of interest by members on tonight's agenda? All good. The agenda contains responses to questions that were taken on notice at the Ordinary Meeting of Council held on the 24th of April 2024. So that's going to bring us to public question time. Some of you have been here before, some of you have not. So what I would say is that there'll be two opportunities. You can either speak in public question time if you'd like to get on and leave the meeting, or have got other things you want to do, or we'll take questions and statements also before the individual items. So those of you who've been to Planning Committee before might recall that that's how we often do it at Planning Committee. That also gives elected members the opportunity to ask you any clarifying questions they might have before those planning items. So I've got a couple of people who have requested to speak during public question time or are speaking on just matters of a general nature. We'll go to them during public question time, but then I'll also ask if there's anyone else who would prefer to speak during public question time, then wait for their item. So first person we've got listed to speak is Ian Kerr. And just while Ian comes up, you've got 3 minutes to speak, and you'll hear a little chime to let you know that those 3 minutes are reaching their end. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to respond to the responses to the questions I asked at the last meeting. Frankly, the responses to most of those questions failed actually to answer them, or apparently even to understand the questions. Therefore, I ask again questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9. And if the questions are unclear, I'm happy to discuss them. The other item I want to talk to is the proposed differential rate, which is item C2405-9. Somewhat disconcertingly, this is just 6 pages buried at the end of the agenda, which rather smacks of a yes minister tactic of Sir Humphrey Appleby. But a table on page 134 shows not only the differential rates, but the proposed increase in general residential rates. And the proposed rate for 24-25 is a 5.4% increase on 23-24, which in turn was a 9% increase on the previous year. Now, inflation in the past 12 months was 3.6%. The Reserve Bank expects inflation to decline to around 3.5% by the end of 24 and to reach a little below 3% at the end of 2025. Fremantle ratepayers will be slugged with a 14.9% increase over 2 years, and revaluations last year mean some people will pay much, much more. At the same time, incomes are increasing at only about half that rate, and incomes affect our ability to pay. And for those in South Fremantle and City South, an additional service charge of $970 on average for 7 years for undergrounding of power is proposed. That's another 50% on top of rates. Why is this service charge hidden in an item on differential rates, I have to ask. There is no indication in the agenda that it is there at all. Nearly half the 9% increase in 23-24 was because the full construction cost of the South Beach toilets and change rooms was charged to the ratepayers of that year. And now the funding has been deferred, so it hasn't actually been expended yet. If those facilities had been funded through loans, The combined rate increase 23 to 25 could be nearly 1/3 less than the city's current proposal of 14.9%. But it gets worse, because the total anticipated rate revenue is forecast to increase by 10%, $5.8 million in 23-24. And since the 2.15 million for the South Beach facilities was a one-off, the City of Fremantle will effectively have $8 million more in operational funds in 24-25. That's an increase of 14.3% in a single year, when inflation will be 3.5%. So, enough is enough.
Thank you, Ian.
It's time, I'm almost there. It's time for the Fremantle community to insist on a forensic examination of the city's finances and accounting practices, and if all else fails, to think seriously about a rate strike. Thank you.
All right, so the question I took out of that was, one of them anyway, was why was the TUP advertised in the differential rate? So I'll go to the Director of City Business to respond to that.
The differential rate item is simply seeking approval from council to advertise them, and we welcome feedback from the community over the next few weeks. So if you wish to provide a submission on the differential rates, we welcome that. As far as the inclusion of the service charges, we're not required to advertise service charges, but we thought it would be prudent to advise the community of the service charges that are upcoming as part of this project.
Thank you. And I'll just note that the answers that were provided in the agenda, are sufficient, I think, on those 9 questions. So if there's something specific Mr. Kerr would like to ask at the next meeting, I would suggest that. But I would also suggest we don't create a business of answering questions when we have lots of other business that we need to attend to. Okay, I have Elizabeth Megros.
Good evening. 2 slogans. All my questions answered, and here to hear you. The first one is on the rear wall of what used to be the temporary admin building while this 20+ million over budget civic centre was being built. The other one is in the window of the much neglected town hall. With this in mind and your promise on the council website that you value access and inclusion, I would like to give you, Mayor Fitzhardinge, some feedback from the perspective of a long-time resident and ratepayer who has been asking questions for a number of years. During these years, Fremantle Council's approach to transparency and accountability has been alarming. Nothing short of Kafkaesque. I'm concerned about what the implications are for democracy. Couple of recent examples to illustrate. 10th of April, Mayor Fitzhardinge, do you not know what the all-inclusive cost is of holding an ordinary meeting? Your meeting, a point you made most firmly on 13th of March. How do figures of the total annual payment to EMs and the annual catering answer the above question? 27th of March, according to CEO Dougal, there was no cost to ratepayers for the live streaming service. Therefore, who was paying for it, I asked April 10. This time the answer states that it was considered to be rhetorical. 10th of April, your answer to Mr. Kerr's question was, quote, we probably take that as a rhetorical statement. However, the minutes report differently. Page 7, Agenda 24, not the above answer uttered at the meeting. 10th of April, I asked specifically about the annual report consideration, which should have taken place on 28th of February as per Local Government Act. Your answer, it's in the minutes. The fact is, the annual report has neither been considered at the OCM nor reported as a motion in the minutes of the 28th of February. 27th of March, a ratepayer related the fact that an EM had told her that council was not interested in ratepayers' views or opinions. That is how ratepayers are made to feel when attending OCMs, to ask questions and receive your answers. When will you, Mayor Fitzharding, walk your talk and live up to your slogans?
Thank you, Ms Nagros, and I'd suggest if you have any complaints, there are plenty of agencies you can take those up with. Mr Dowson, did you wish to speak now or at the end?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening all. The questions on finances, I know you don't want to get bogged down with too many questions, but we did spend quite a few hours putting together the financial questions. And rather than read them out, we have submitted them at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So under the heading, with our money, why don't you do what you say you're going to do? We have a series of questions. We'd appreciate.
They've been received, thank you.
Answers to that, thank you. All right, so I want to focus on 28 Cantonment Street briefly. The developer is seeking not to have to pay $140,000 for public artworks. And the developer argues, for example, that the proposed development did not require design excellence. And the developer argues that in these extraordinary times, we need to take a pragmatic view of what costs are appropriate to apply to developers. But there needs to be developer contribution to the amenity of the area, not just the profit of the development itself for the owners. And anything built in the centre of this historic town should have design excellence. And too many, but not all, of this developer's previous developments have not added a great deal of excellence. In the background of the plans submitted can be seen a rendition of what the developer plans for part of the rest of the site. What looks like an 18-story tower of apartments. And plans for these have been lodged with the SDAU, I understand, about a year ago. Now, Western Australia has 4 significant heritage towns: Albany, York, Kalgoorlie, and Fremantle. And some in the community say we shouldn't be scared of height, though surveys show that the vast majority in Fremantle want the human scale of Fremantle kept. Can you imagine arriving in Kalgoorlie, York, or Albany to be greeted by an 18-story tower of apartments? It would destroy the human scale and character of those towns and would do the same for Fremantle. So 2 questions come out of this. One. What is Fremantle Council doing to protect the human scale of Fremantle from such outrageous proposals in the historic town? And 2, can the developer be encouraged to spend the $140,000 on perhaps heritage works, either, for example, inside the magnificent town hall or as urban design enhancements along Queen Street with, for example, high quality, appropriate lighting as exists in High Street in the West End? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take those as part of the debate. Okay. Are there any others who would prefer to speak at this point in the meeting? Otherwise, we'll go to the items. Yep. Okay. Come up.
My 2 bob worth on the Fremantle alternative.
Okay.
I'm Sally Laurie. I've lived here since the 80s and I love Freo, and I think we all should be so grateful. And I acknowledge the original owners of this land very much. Okay.
Please bring the microphone,
closer?
Sally, if you would, because people are online and they can't hear very well.
Here?
Yeah,
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about. I'm not against urban infill. That's my first point to make. And I think well-managed urban infill is fantastic. but I've had a disastrous experience. Okay, I live next to number 11, the inaugural urban infill Freo alternative. And I just don't think it passes the pub test. It doesn't pass the pub test on providing one, affordable housing, two, on the social impacts, three, most importantly, more than anything else, on the environmental impacts, and four, and I would suggest that there's been a little bit the integrity of the planning department and councillors is questionable at times, apart from, I must say, Jeff Graham.
I would just caution you that we, within our code of conduct, wouldn't suggest that you impugn the integrity of councillors. So perhaps come back to the key
well,
point.
maybe integrity, maybe disingenuous.
I wouldn't go there. So perhaps come back to your
I think I am
point.
Well,
thanks.
Please have respect for me. Okay, 11 Smith Street. Affordability, to put 2 or 3 houses on one block, just think about it. Have all of you got a spare million to buy a block? Have all of you got a 1.5 million to build 3 houses? And that's what you'll need. So it has to be an investor or someone who's inherited a block, or 4 fabulous bosom buddy friends, okay? Okay. And the place next door to us was developed by a FIFO who did not live there, okay? And I was very concerned that it would become a boarding house for FIFOs because the front house was a boarding house. I was reassured by the council, and I have it in writing, that it wouldn't be, okay? I was dismissed, saying that this would not be a room rental development. Once again, affordable housing, renters I feel for. Number 2, the disruption, the social disruption. There have been neighbours actually fighting in other streets. There have been walls built in other streets. Our big impact has been parking. We've got 9 FIFOs, 9 people living in a place with 3 car parks. It doesn't fit. It does not fit at all. They've all got cars. They park their cars there, go to the airport to avoid parking. It's a nightmare. Okay. When your rubbish doesn't get collected because the car's parked in front of your rubbish bins, it's unpleasant. And I'm sorry, Hannah, I'm not testing the integrity, but I was honestly told that people would ride push bikes. Our house is full of families, 2.3 kids. They're not going to put their little babies or kids on a push bike to get into Freo. And I found that actually a bit insulting, okay? So maybe it's not integrity, but I was fobbed off on that. The third one is environmentally. It is a disaster. When you have a 60-year-old gum destroyed.
3 minutes, so I'll just ask you to bring it to a close.
You have a gum destroyed, you have every tree destroyed, and it's replaced by concrete and sand. What are you doing to our planet, people? Think about your decision making. Okay, and I won't get on to integrity, but I will say I was told at a meeting, what's the fuss about natives? Okay, I heard 2 councillors telling, not councillors, 2 planning committee people telling the developer they would do all they could to get the plans through.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, please be respectful of people who live here, and more than anything, be respectful of this planet for the future of your kids. And cutting down trees and creating
Thank you,
short-term
Sally.
rentals.
I'm going to wrap it up now because that is 3, maybe 4 minutes. So
it's 6 seconds a year for every year I've lived here.
Thank you. And the other person who wanted to speak, thank you.
Hello, councillors. Thanks for your time. My name's Joel. I'm the owner of Ripple Brewing, the proposed brewery and tap room in Beaconsfield. I was born in Fremantle, have lived here my whole life, and have been working in the brewing and hospitality industries for over 15 years. I've always had a dream of opening my own brewery, and Ripple is the culmination of that. Our venue will exist to serve the local community as its first priority, almost as an extension of your living room. We'll sell our products directly to our customers at the tap room rather than through national distributors or liquor chains. This is the future of the craft beer industry, hyper-local neighbourhood breweries in place of multinational pseudo-craft beer. We have seen this shift more broadly across many industries, the resurgence of the local artisan bakery, for example, where people are now going to Wild Bakery, Big Loaf and Little Loaf for their bread rather than Coles, Woolies and Brumbies. For some context, a brewery like Gage Rose is making somewhere in the vicinity of 15 million litres of beer per year. We'll be making 50,000 litres a year. So we are truly a micro producer with a focus on creating a warm, engaging and quality experience for our guests. We have also over-invested in our equipment, which, albeit small, is world-class in terms of its efficiencies. Our spent grain, hops and yeast will be collected by a farmer for cattle feed, and we will recapture water throughout the process, amongst other things. I have a young family myself and have found that there is a real lack of family-friendly options in South Freo, with no child play areas, the proximity to busy roads and a lack of parking all contributing. Ripple will have plenty of parking, a kids' play area and a relaxed and easygoing vibe. The area of Beaconsfield has long been slated for development, but has remained stagnant. We believe our little development could be a fire starter for the area and help to rejuvenate and de-intensify the industrial nature of that pocket of Beaconsfield with something that actually serves the community. Finally, I've been working on this for 1.5 years. This will be my place of work, my career, and as such, I would greatly appreciate your support on this. Hope to see you all at Ripple for a drink and a feed later this year. Cheers.
Thanks, Joel. Councillors, I note that Joel is the only speaker on this item, which we're coming to a bit later in the agenda, but does anyone have any questions for Joel as the operator and proponent? Nope, we're good. You obviously covered it off. All right, we'll go to the items now as listed in the agenda, if everyone's comfortable with that. So the first item that I'll look for a mover for is the deferred item, the Pritchard Street animated sign addition. Did we, oh no, hang on, we're not moving. Ooh, yeah, I'm looking at my wrong page. Also, the speakers on that need to happen first. So you've been warned, that's coming up first. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the confirmation of the minutes. There it is. Moved by Councillor Williamson-Wong, seconded Councillor Lorber. All those in favour? Excellent. So the next item we're going to is Pritchard Street, and I believe I've got 3 speakers listed on this one. I'm not sure if you've got a particular order you were hoping to speak in, but I've got Jason Pasqua, Justin Pasqua and Paul Kotsoglu all listed. So I guess, Jason, if you want to kick us off.
Good evening. My name is Jason Pasqua. I'm a director of the site's landowner. Thank you for the opportunity to address council and those at the site visits and that contacted us. Our family is a long-term custodian of the site and has a strong association with the city. My grandparents grew up on York Street, my father grew up on Edmund Street, and myself and my brother are Notre Dame graduates. Site leasing is by Fremantle Property Services. Site finance with National Bank Fremantle and accounting with Francis Jones Fremantle. It is a site that is serviced by Fremantle businesses, and it is a site that contains businesses that service Fremantle. This is why we are seeking a good outcome and representation for the on-site businesses and for us as its manager. The site is a large complex. It can accommodate 10 businesses. There are 2 front showrooms, including Adreno, that trains diving enthusiasts of the coast. The 8 warehouses at the rear have limited exposure, including Winterwear Ceramics, who manufacture at the site and retail in Fremantle, and IRS, who service refrigerated shipping containers at the port. The site is the first corner gateway site to Fremantle along South Street before O'Connor, with over 60,000 daily traffic movements. It's 11,000 square metres, but 1/4 of this area along Stock Road is under a main roads reservation, and the current verges around the site are degraded. Our proposal has been carefully formulated over 3 years, including recent council feedback. For the businesses at the site, all are in support. Their kind written comments were submitted to council today. Our proposal includes 5% use free of charge for them. If we assume the image on the sign changes every 45 seconds, this 5% gives these on-site businesses 35,000 displays a year. This is 10 displays or 7 minutes for each on-site business every day throughout the day free of charge. and the biggest business at the site has the same display as the smallest. Feedback is this will move the dial, promoting their businesses to the traffic intersection. There is also nothing preventing any of the on-site businesses applying for additional, albeit paid, display time. For us as the managers, this site is challenging given the road reserve over a quarter of its area. Businesses hesitate to set up. A recent vacancy was for 5 years. Businesses worry roadworks in the reserve part may remove access or impact trading. So when we attract a business, there are break clauses or rent significantly below market. This limits our leasing and redevelopment while supporting holding and mortgage costs. The sign will be a unique feature supporting our on-site businesses to do well and lets us continue refurbishing and landscaping to make it an attractive spot to operate from despite the road planning issues. For the community, 5% free of charge. We envisage usage by local groups, even by Fremantle Arts Centre to display art or the History Centre. We also envision the 90% of third-party advertising may include use by other Fremantle businesses or organisations like the University, the Esplanade Hotel or Fremantle Markets. And again, the revenue will assist us continue site improvements. In conclusion, working on this proposal, we have learned a digital sign will not work at just anywhere. There is a high threshold and range of variables to overcome. Major thoroughfare, avoiding device restriction zones of traffic lights and street signs, not impacting residences, lighting and road studies, time and cost being distant to other digital signs. We have met these along with providing community benefit, and we have a site with 10 on-site tenancies that will benefit, unlike other properties that may be single tenant or complex strata ownership.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to call 3 minutes on you, if that's all right.
That's not a problem. Thank you, councillors.
What we'll do is we will listen to the other speakers, and then if councillors have got questions, then we can direct them to the most appropriate person. So, Justin Pasqua.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. My name is Justin Pasqua. I'd like to address the council on some of the more technical aspects of this proposal. Firstly, I'd like to clarify that the images on the digital sign are static. It displays a still digital image, and this still image changes after a dwell time set by main roads, being around 40 to 60 seconds. There are no moving videos, no flashing colours or moving text. It is a still image that just changes. Main roads also require a conditional approval agreement that details the allowable brightness, type of content, and situations where the sign might need to be turned off. As a large corner property, we've been able to locate the sign 46 metres from the intersection curving deep into the site in a corner of 2 existing buildings. Its white pylon blends in with the adjoining buildings, and it has an attractive charcoal frame on the screen. The total height after consultation has been reduced by 1.3 metres, making the sign consistent with the scale of existing buildings and vegetation, sitting only 2.5 metres above the roof of the building immediately next to it. Regarding lighting analysis, after feedback from council, we re-engaged the expert lighting consultant to reconfirm its lighting impact assessment report and also specifically review the residential houses in the vicinity. The sign's location, orientation, height, and screen technology have all been carefully considered. The result is that the expert has concluded the proposed signage shall not cause any unacceptable amenity impacts to nearby residences or accommodation. The sign faces the traffic intersection and has a directional display which appears almost black when at the edges of its viewing angles. And it's at these angles where the houses are located directly opposite the site. In addition, existing surrounding attributes such as land contours, large vegetation, fences and structures on the site itself further provide protection for residential houses. Regarding landscaping, our proposal includes professional landscape architecture plans showing native landscaping beneath the digital sign and significant site-wide landscaping for the verges on Stock Road, South Street and Pritchard Street, including feature lights at the base of each tree along Pritchard Street to create an illuminated green corridor. This was done to further integrate the digital sign into the property, create visual interest and make the site an attractive business destination. Approval of the sign will help us fund these landscaping works and their future maintenance. In summary, this is a carefully considered proposal that will have a meaningful impact for a range of stakeholders on a property afflicted with external issues. We thank you for your time to consider.
Thank you, Justin. And Paul Kotsoglu?
Madam Mayor, before I start, I spoke to your support officer. I have some documents that were circulated electronically today, but I bought hard copies as well in case anybody didn't receive them.
Does that look familiar?
So it looks like it's got Planning Solutions logo on it, and I like that. Yes?
Okay, we've all got a copy of that, I believe.
You don't need my hard copy, thank you. I might just move that. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors, officers, members of the community. My name's Paul Kotsoglu, working for 25 nominees in relation to the sign on the corner of South Street and Stock Road. We are seeking approval for it. We have noted the alternative motion that's proposed, alternative motion presented by a councillor. We're pleased to see that. We'd ask for it to be supported. It's appropriate, in our opinion, to issue an approval for this. It's appropriate because we say it meets the expectations of the planning framework. The planning framework includes statute and policy, and the DAP training manual, which members that are involved in planning decisions follow, refers to the application of planning policy, and that it should not be slavishly applied without the application, in summary, of common sense. We say this is a common sense approach to grant an approval. It should be applied with common sense, flexibility, in the context of the application and the site, and what the outcome will produce. And the outcome in our submission is that this is a positive contribution. It improves the aesthetics of the site. It improves the biodiversity through the provision of landscaping, which is currently going to apply to things like the road reserves and the areas that are currently sand around the car parking areas. It will improve the aesthetics. It will improve the site's presentation, much of which has been reserved under the region planning scheme. The lighting report, as was mentioned, shows that there is no impact on the people across the road, the residences across the road, which have masonry fences over 2 metres high in most instances, and buildings that back onto South Street. There will be third-party advertising for tenants and community groups. It will be solar powered during the day. Main Roads guidelines will control what goes on the sign. In fact, Main Roads have provided conditions of approval. They would advise of an objection if they had one. We've written support from the tenants, as referred to in my document earlier, circulated earlier today. It's been designed to integrate as best as possible with the site. There have been some incorrect notes in the report that I'd point out. Paragraph 2 makes reference to it not being consistent with the R codes. The R codes don't apply in this instance. This leads the reader to think that we're imposing adversely on the amenity of the residents. That's not the case. It's misleading. We'd ask you to consider that in the assessment. It's not appropriate. Okay.
Just if you want to wrap up, I'm sure people will have questions potentially.
Okay, thank you. Yes, look, we'd ask you to consider this on the merits of the case. I will encourage you to support the alternative recommendation. It's not correct to say the policy doesn't permit it. The policy doesn't address this type of sign, so it's inappropriate to say it should be refused. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I do have a question to kick off, and then I'll look to elected members. In terms of Main Roads WA and the engagement with them, there's a reference in the report to the fact that Main Roads would have to approve any verge improvements or treatments. Have you had any engagement with Main Roads in regards to the verge?
I'll ask the gentleman that is with me.
Yep.
There have been several meetings with Main Roads, and as I understand it, that's the case. But the gentleman will answer that.
Thanks.
Yes, so thanks for the question. We haven't specifically had any conversations with Main Roads about anything other than the signage. However, they are open to the sign, and as long as what we do in the Main Roads Reserve doesn't incorporate any structures, they are generally happy. So if in our proposal we've submitted that we'll be lawning the road reserve, that shouldn't be an issue for them at all.
And that the landscaping is not to be higher than a half a metre in any area.
Right. Yeah.
There's an expectation that there would be landscaping because that's what has been presented and that's what's been discussed with the traffic engineers, but we don't get into that detail until a planning approval's been granted.
Okay. So the uplit trees to provide a green corridor less than half a metre? I think.
In height.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Different
Sorry, to clarify,
section.
the green corridor is going to be along Pritchard Street.
Okay.
The road reserve is the corner of South Street and Stock Road.
Right. Thank you.
And there's pictures of that landscaping in that document
Yeah.
circulated.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll just add one comment to that as well, Mayor. So the lawning of the Stock Road reservation is entirely consistent with just further up the road where Officeworks, Super Amart, that bulky goods centre, so they have a similar road reservation and they've lawned and maintained that to the satisfaction of Main Roads.
All right. I might just ask the manager for a comment on that as well, and then I'll go to elected members for your questions.
Through you, Chair, since the item was deferred and the proposal for landscaping was put to the city, we did run that past Main Roads because the applicant has only proposed effectively lawn in that section. They didn't raise any objection, but like the applicants mentioned, they will have to go through an approval process for that. Pritchard Street is within the city's control, and our Parks and Landscape team will work with the applicant if this item is approved to determine which tree species go in there.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the applicants? Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. It's in relation to the proposed alternative motion that I've put in the additional documents. There was a conversation prior to the last council meeting regarding imposing a time-limited approval. My recollection was 10 years was what was discussed, so that was what I put in my alternative recommendation. That's not to suggest that it can't be extended by a future council, but it was time limited in terms of the decision that would be made if that got up. Is that consistent with the conversation that we had? And is that the sort of time frame that allows for, I guess, a reasonable business plan for the sign?
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Look, it is roughly in line. We were hopeful if there was a time limit placed on it, it would be between 12 to 15 years, and that's purely because given as well now that there'll be this additional landscaping component, it does extend the payback on the sign quite substantially. In saying that, if the councillors believe 10 years is 10 years, that's fine, but obviously if we can get between 12 to 15, that would be fantastic. And also the other comment, and Jason just reminded me, Main Roads will also limit the sign's existence given if anything happens with road widening. So in the agreement that we'll be signing with Main Roads, the sign may have to be turned off or decommissioned if there's a road widening event that requires that land. And yes, we also discussed 12 to 15 with Main Roads as well, but that's yet to be fully fleshed out with them until we get a development approval.
Second question is, in the drafting of the alternative motion, the officers recommended that the landscaping works be completed prior to turning the sign on, simply because they have, I guess, concerns about how you manage a situation where the landscape is completed after a critical moment in the process. Is again that just seek your comment on that. Presumably it's just a modified business plan where you have to borrow some money up front and you get it back after a few years.
That's correct. So look, we had a brief discussion this afternoon, and while it does make it a little bit more difficult, it's definitely not impossible, and we're very grateful that that was recommended as well, and we can be heard on that.
So
Thank you.
in summary and in short, we would prefer an approval.
We've never heard that here before, so thank you. Councillors, we're all good, no further questions? All right, I'll let you gents sit down, and I will ask for someone to move the officer's recommendation. That's Councillor Lorber, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Lorber, did you want to open?
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to thank Jason and Justin for being good custodians of this site, and for looking at long-term, sustainable things that can be done to improve the area. Because I think it's important that we do look at O'Connor, and we do look at that section of our city and how we can make those improvements and make improvements. But this specific proposal is against our current policy. And it's not just a little bit against it, it's pretty far against it. It's to approve this sign, we would need 100% on-site businesses being advertised. They're proposing 5%. So it's a pretty big exemption that we are being potentially asked to grant through the alternate recommendation. And that's why I'm supporting the officer's recommendation. Because the other bit of this is also the potential precedent that we would be setting for this. And I would just say, if we want to allow signs such as this in Fremantle, we should change our policy. Because if this is approved, what's going to stop the folks from right across the road wanting to put up their own electronic sign? Or the last industrial area in North Fremantle put up a sign there before it all gets built out and changed. If we do these changes by exemption, we open ourselves up to having to approve other signs that we frankly may not want. And by changing our policy, we can have more control as to where and when these types of things will potentially be put. So I would just say that for me would be the way forward. The community is pretty opposed to this. If you look at page 19 of the agenda, you can see from the backyard, from across the road, that site and where the sign would be and the light that would come in. I've been in all those backyards pretty much, and there's a pretty good view of this location. But it's not just across the road in Hilton. It's almost actually worse when you go over to Sampson and you look at Wellesley Way and Marshall Way and those streets there. That's almost a better view of where this sign will be pumping its light directly. So I think that we would want to really consider the impact that this will have on those folks. And I do support improving the verges and landscaping. I think that's an admirable thing, but we should do that through our verge policy that we just approved. There are other ways to achieve outcomes on our verges than potentially granting an exception that could set a dangerous precedent that we could see in other areas of the city that's unintended. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation, and I look forward to hearing what others have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Moughlin, did you wish to?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I'll just also add that I'm supporting the officer's recommendation. Not so much in regards to impacts, because I think the technology and the like is significantly improved from maybe what we would see at South Fremantle Oval, which casts a midday sun across the city when it's midnight. And I don't expect that this signage would do so. But yeah, the inconsistency with the policy in regards to advertising for tenants or the users of the site is significant. So I can't support the proposal. So I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Kamada?
Yeah, I'll jump in at this point. Yeah, I'm 50-50 on this one. I can see that the applicants have worked hard to address the issues that were raised on February 14, and it's admirable what you want to do to improve the area. I'd like to support it because I think it's in the right place, and we should be supporting our businesses where possible. However, it is at odds with the policy, as Councillor Lorber and Moughlin have pointed out, and I'm not sure how we go about it. Perhaps we need to look at that down the track in whatever way we can. So yeah, it'd be nice to have some flexibility. I know that policy is just there to guide us, and that we can make decisions that are not, in accordance totally. But yeah, as I said, I'm 50-50, so I'm keen to hear what others have to say before I make my final decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kamara. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. I'm not going to support the officer's recommendation. Obviously, I wouldn't have put an alternative motion in the documents if I was. And I'm going to ask that elected members support me in not supporting the officer's recommendation. And I note Councillor Lorva's comments about sticking to policy. But of course, in this chamber this year, on numerous occasions, most of us have varied significantly from policy in additions, in housing, including in Hilton. So policy is there as a guide. It can't possibly cover everything. If it was an exacting matter, an exacting science, if it was needed to be applied exactly, it would be in the scheme, not in policy. Policy is there to be flexible, to be guiding, to be a general overall guide for the whole of Fremantle, and not every situation is going to be coverable in a policy. Councillors, I want also for you to think about supporting owners of our older commercial and industrial areas, and to help them be competitive in what is actually a very difficult market. They're competing with brand new industrial estates to our south and to our east. And they're trying to attract the same clients, the same tenants. They need a critical mass. They need a sense of a precinct. So it is actually quite difficult. But it's while that's difficult generally, it is particularly difficult when you've got a main roads reservation over a huge chunk, 25% or something like that, of your site, because it really blights anything that you can do there. And because it blights, you can't do massive improvements, or you just concede that you're never going to be able to use that land, and you do the development on what land would be left. And that's not always a good outcome. So they are very blighted, and they also suffer the consequences of that in their hip pocket when they go to lease these buildings and the like. So I want us to consider those things in making sure that we give every opportunity for particularly these landowners where they are so blighted to find ways of generating the income to maintain the property, to improve the property, to present the property well, and to create that sense of a gateway to this industrial and commercial precinct. In my view, the proposed advertising sign is actually quite modest. I know it feels big in relation to what the buildings are there now, because they're the old style industrial sheds. But if you actually look at the few modern showrooms that exist, Bunnings, next to Bunnings, up the road and Stock Road and the like, most of those buildings are 7.5, 8 metres high parapets. This is a 9.2 metre sign. It wouldn't, if this site was redeveloped and you put a 9.2 metre high sign on an 8 metre high parapet wall, it would not be incongruous at all. It would be what you would anticipate would be there. So in a physical form sense, I think we need to be a little bit more realistic and sympathetic to the fact that this is an older area. But in any case, the document also talks about the character of the industrial estate and the commercial areas, and talks about, well, we need to make sure development is consistent with the desired and future desired physical nature of that area. Well, when I went to our codes, when I go into our scheme to try and find out what that actually means, where that is actually documented, I found pretty much a blank, because there are no height limits, as far as I can tell. There is no guiding sort of imagery document that says this is how this area is going to be developed. It's pretty well open slather. So But open slather generally, where you have seen developments there, has been those large showrooms with those 8-metre high parapet walls and extra things like the Bunnings have with their 3 balls sticking up in the air. So I would contend that improvements to the physical nature of the area is really our objective for the future of this area. And if that's what is being proposed, and it is because of the provision, the inclusion of a significant amount of landscaping, then it is consistent with a desired character and desired improvement for the area. And it does help not just this applicant, but it helps the whole precinct become the sort of place that businesses want to participate in, be a part of, because it has a sense of place. And that's what businesses are often looking for. You know, they want to go into, you know, what they do down in Cockburn. You know, they'll call something the commercial or the industrial estate so that people know that they're a part of something. And that's what businesses who might want to invest in this area want to see as well. They want to feel like there is a sense of place and a sense of pride that can only come when you do something with the physical externalities of your site. There is also this argument that the pylon sign is not consistent with our policies. Now, there is a clause in our policy that actually talks about signs which are kind of like this one, but the definition of it does not apply to this sign. The definitions in our policies don't, in my view, cover this type of sign exactly in a meaningful way. It is a unique type of signage, and I get that anybody would be concerned that we might be opening the door for other signs. Having said that, we've refused 2 or 3 that I can think of in the past because they're in places like the west end of Fremantle, no less, or in the North Fremantle Town Centre, or in Hampton Road. All places where the defined character of the area is well defined, where residential is included and the like. You're not going to find many sites across Fremantle where it is industrial commercial and where there is where residential is so far away from it, and that the science demonstrates categorically that there is not light impost onto those residential areas. I'm looking at it going, in fact, there's probably no more impact than already exists from the light, say from the service station or the like. I'd be far more worried if I was a resident about a service station that was basically an as of right over the road from them, not because of the light, but because of the 24-hour noise and those sort of things. So in terms of amenity, the light that this projects out has been demonstrated scientifically twice that it doesn't have a detrimental impact on the residents that live 75 and more metres away. So I'm requesting that you really take into account the fact that the sign itself will assist a blighted site make significant improvements to their surroundings, and also that we're not exactly going, if we approve this, to what they asked for, because what they asked for was primarily a sign. What we would be doing is approving it with a requirement for landscaping on 3 sides, and landscaping that is done up front, so there is no question, it's guaranteed, landscaping that has to be maintained for the life of the development, and that the life of the development in the first instance would be 10 years, and that any future extension of that would be subject, obviously, to another planning application and consideration at the time, and who knows what the requirements might be at that point. So, councillors, I know it's not easy to set aside policy. I mean, I'm often the one that says I want to stick to the policy on a particular occasion, but policy is not LAW law. It is not the exact science that we need to follow on every occasion. And in this occasion, I think this very unique one-off situation allows us to give consideration to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I might follow on a little bit from Councillor Sullivan's comments. I think where I was getting stuck, and I'm a bit like Councillor Kamada on this, I'm a bit sort of 50-50. In reading the policy doesn't speak to this type of sign, in my view, the sort of billboard type sign which we're talking about here. And in fact, I asked the manager, and I might get her to repeat what she said to me, you know, how do we allow billboards on any, you know, within the city of Fremantle on land that we have control or influence over? So I might get the manager to give the answer that she gave me, because it sort of made me think.
Through you, Chair, the policy does talk to not supporting signs, whether it's illuminated, animated, static, that doesn't advertise something that's on site. So the purpose of signage, as outlined in the policy, is really to identify a business or a product on that site to help people find their way effectively.
Yeah. So that sort of makes sense for me for normal signage, you know, for like, you know, what am I going to find in this shopping complex signage? Of course, it means that billboards aren't really, you know, you're not allowed to have them anywhere, which we know isn't true. They mainly happen on land that's not controlled by us, so on reserves that belong to the PTA or, you know, other bodies. So I guess applying that policy to me, I feel like it's just a different context in a sense here, where we're really talking about what would be a billboard that would be immediately accepted potentially if it were on the land next to the rail line, for example, because it's not within our jurisdiction. They'd be more than happy to have it. Because it's on our land, we've got some control, not our land, on the land over which we have some influence. We have also some control, and we can condition some good things happening, like, you know, the verges and planting and all that kind of stuff. I'm kind of with Councillor Sullivan on the light issue. It literally cannot be as bright as the artificial turf sign that I can see from my house a good K away, which isn't even dimmed by the lights of the servo, which are significant. I've seen these type of billboards. The lights, it sort of reads like, in my view, a flat screen TV. It doesn't have that kind of in-your-faceness. So that the science on that, I'm not convinced that there's a real issue around light spill. I do worry about precedent, and I think that's where I kind of have been most stuck, and where I'll keep listening to the debate is really, you know, to what extent are we now saying electronic billboards, which might not be as you know, kind of considered or high quality or whatever as this one, are now okay within the city of Fremantle? Because even when people put out variable message signs, you know, advertising that they've got cheap pet food or whatever, we tend to tell them that's not okay for the, you know, reasons of not supporting electronic signage. So a bit blind ball, keen to hear what other people have got to say about it. I'm still reading the policy. I can see what the policy is trying to do. It just, in my view, wasn't really written with this type of proposal in mind. Councillors. Right, Councillor Lawver, you're going to close, so I'm just going to check and make sure no one else wants to have a word. Thank you. Councillor Williamson-Moore.
I'll be quick. I guess all I am saying is that I'm inclined to support Andrew's alternative motion. I think I've been 50-50 on it too, but I do agree that I'm not convinced the amenity will be impacted much more than what's already on those sites. And in terms of if we could place a sign like this anywhere, it would be on that site and in that precinct. You know, it faces onto, you know, mainly an industrial precinct. And I liked what Councillor Sullivan was saying in terms of we do still have these precincts within our city, and so how do we also support them to make them viable and keep those Fremantle businesses in Fremantle as they expand and as they grow? I mean, Winterwear started in Whitegum, and now it's moved to be in the CBD and in this precinct. And I think it would be a loss if businesses got too big to operate in Fremantle. And if this is the way we can support them to stay, then that feels like a win.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak prior to Councillor Lawver closing? Nope. Okay, Councillor Lorva, over to you.
Look, I understand that folks see that industrial area and they think, oh, it's just all degraded and it's just needs to have something happen. Um, but to create a precinct, our our policy says the sign has to advertise, as the mayor said, the buildings and the businesses that are on site. 95% of this advertising is going to be for McDonald's or TAB or whatever paying customer can afford to do it. It's not going to be creating a precinct at all. It'll be advertising services and businesses that could be far flung or things that we may or may not support. It could be advertising Woodside. Who knows? It'll be strictly for profit. There's a very simple way to get this sign approved, and that is to have it be 100% advertising the businesses on site. But that's not what we're being asked to approve. That's not what, well, we're being asked to reject it based on that. So I would just say it's a 40 square meter illuminated sign. It's huge. It is big. And whether or not it adds to the already increased light pollution in the area, there is science on that, and if you walked around, you could see it, and it will definitely add to the existing, illumination in that area. So I would just really say that, if I'm happy to work with the proponents to get a proposal that's more in line with what we're trying to do as far as with our sign policy. As Andrew said, we've rejected them in lots of different areas in Fremantle because they're not congruent with that place, because it was probably third-party advertising. I would say that in this instance as well, we should do the same. We should support what the officers have put forward, because otherwise, driving into Fremantle, you'll see advertisements for Hungry Jack's. You'll see advertisements for 95% of the time for things that may or may not have anything to do with Fremantle, and we'll have no control over that. So I would just caution us on setting this precedent, because, like I said, doing it here gives people the idea that they can do this in other places. Maybe the sailing club could put one up across the road. Maybe just across the road at the Home World. It's something that we should do with very much caution, and I think the staff have got it right. So I would just encourage everyone to think of the folks that live up there, think about what we might be approving, and if we did want to have this on, like I said, there's a very easy way to do it, and that's advertise the businesses that are there, actually create a precinct, and that would be something that would be more supportable. The other thing that I'll add is I also suggested maybe moving it further up Stock Road would be something that might be more supportable, because then it's not directly at that corner pumping out light into the residents who live there. And that was not really considered at all either. So there might be places where something like this, I would be more amenable to having it done, and that would even be further potentially north up on that site. But in this location and what's being proposed, it's too far for me to go. So I would implore you to support the work the staff had done and support the refusal. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lorva. So we'll put this one to a vote. We're voting on the officer's recommendation for refusal. So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation, Councillors Moughlin, Lorva and Lang, and against. So that's lost. So we've got an alternative recommendation on the table. Councillor Sullivan.
Alternative recommendation.
And do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Graham. On the alternative.
Thank you. Just a couple of things I'll just re-emphasise about the alternative. The first one is that it is for 10 years. That's a very short period of time, as was answered in the questions that I asked. But it also, I think, gives council some degree of surety, some degree of, it's more stick than it is carrot in a sense, to ensure that if they want to get a further approval down the track, that we'll expect a very good behaviour approach to not only the sign but to the landscaping and the maintenance, and not anticipate having any negative feedback out of community in 10 years' time. So that's a really important part of the way the officers have structured the alternative for me. And the second, as I said briefly, the applicants were seeking to get a landscaping approach that allowed to do some of the landscaping now and then some of the landscaping in about 18 months' time when the sign sort of generated some income. Essentially, what the officers have advised, I guess, is that realistically, trying to get them to then have to sort of watch the clock and go out and make sure the landscaping is done and everything is not normal good planning practice. And it is better to basically say, well, you want the sign, the landscaping and the sign are integrated. It's all part of the same package, and it needs to be done up front. So you'll just have to go to the National Bank in Fremantle, I think it was, and borrow some money to do that. I don't. While I would give some consideration personally to changing the 10 years to a little bit longer, I actually think that given the contentious nature of this sign, it is an unusual thing that a time-limited approval is the right way to go. I certainly wouldn't suggest that we modify that at all. So I'll put that to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lang?
Yeah, just a question through the chair for Councillor Sullivan, and the intent of point 9. I just wanted to clarify. Second paragraph of point 9. There's maintenance and there's maintenance, and that's the only thing that I'm caught out here on this proposal. I agree with the beautification is a good outcome. But what I'm worried about is the definition of maintenance, and I'm wondering if we could maybe tighten that up a little bit by at the tail end of that paragraph's stating to the satisfaction of the City of Fremantle, because I know this particular site, it won't take much for a few cars to start squishing the plants under the trees on the side street, and then come back to my main point. There's maintenance and there's maintenance. I was wondering if we might better add a little bit on the end to say to the satisfaction of the City of Fremantle.
That's on the screen now. Is that how are you happy with that, Councillor Sullivan?
Well, I'll perhaps ask the manager because it's probably more in her court because she has to do the managing.
Through the chair, I think that's fine. I think I would just add on advice from Main Roads WA before, because it does talk to the road verges, which one is ours and others are Main Roads. So a bit like the first part of the condition, just repeating that as well.
On advice from Main Roads WA to the satisfaction of the City of Fremantle. So I'm happy to accept that as a modification if the seconder does.
Yep, I think so. Okay. Councillor Lang, did you wish to speak further on the item? Okay. Councillor Lorber?
Yeah, just a question. How can we ensure that that there's only 95% of the time where there are messages advertising things that aren't relevant to the site? How do we envision actually being able to enforce that in this thing? Because it seems to me it'd be pretty difficult. So I'm just wondering how we can ensure that that is what's done.
Through the chair, there is an element of trust when you issue a planning approval, a bit like when we condition a business is only to operate within a certain number of hours. Yes, we could go and stand in front of the sign and count those, but we really just have to take the applicant on their word. It's in their proposal, and if they're demonstrated to not be adhering to that, then compliance would need to investigate and see what action needed to be taken. Main Roads would also be reviewing that requirement as well, I suspect, in terms of all of their approvals and making sure they adhered to the dwell times and all of those things as well. So there's, I guess, two agencies checking on elements of the approval.
Did you wish to speak as well?
I just as a question, whether or not Councillor Sullivan would consider a friendly amendment to make it just like 50% local businesses advertising on there, have that be a condition rather than the 5%.
Councillor Sullivan?
Well, if you're willing to, allow the second commentary. The applicants, I'll point Councillor Lorber to the applicant's document. On the back page of that, they have an alternative motion that they wrote, and somewhere in there, and I can't see which number it is, but they did talk about a way of, I guess, managing that. The second thing I would say is that, and you'd have to ask the manager as to whether that's even doable. So you could move an amendment, I guess would be minor, it's really procedural. The second thing I would say is that I'm going to take it on face value that the notion that the city is involved in the 5% and then the on-site people are involved in 5%. I don't think we should necessarily be taking that offer up as the city, but it should just be more broadly community advertising. I haven't tried to incorporate that because I think it's actually, as the manager said, it's quite difficult to imagine how you would then go and manage that. You'd probably have to get an annual report of who advertised and how many times, etc., etc. I'm sure it's quite doable, but I would lastly just point to, I think that's why you do a 10-year approval, because that is really the biggest stick that you have, because it will take 7 or 8 years before they even get their money back.
Sorry, Councillor Sullivan, what I heard Councillor Lorver ask was, would you change the alternative recommendation to say 50% local business on-site advertising? You don't seem to have taken up that offer.
The answer to that is absolutely no, because it would essentially make the whole proposal unviable, as essentially a refusal.
Thank you. Councillors, probably just on the issue of compliance, I guess my thoughts on that were, if I were one of the businesses in the complex and I was struggling to get sign time, if you like, I would be relying on that condition to ensure that the owners do the right thing. I.e., if I'm feeling like I'm not getting sufficient percentage of the sign, or collectively as businesses and we're not feeling like we're getting sign time, then I would come to the city and say we don't believe this has been complied with. So I don't think it's going to be a question of waiting 10 years to see if anyone's unhappy. When we do put conditions in like this and make them publicly known, people who don't feel like those conditions are being complied with to their detriment usually are pretty quick to let us know about it. All right. Further discussion, councillors? Councillor Sullivan, do you wish to close?
Perhaps if I can just ask a question of the managers before I do, which is essentially, is there a clause that you could imagine incorporating in this that would provide a little bit more clarity about how to manage the community and on-site content?
Through the chair, there could be quite a short condition that read something along the lines of the signage content should have a minimum 5% on-site business content. Sorry, I'm thinking of something on the run a little bit here. So you could have a simple condition along those lines if you're wanting to sort of belt and brace the applicant's approval.
So that would, I mean, based on the application, if your indulgence,
it's fine. Let's get it right.
It would be something like the approved signage to include a minimum of 5% on-site advertising, or sorry, advertising of on-site businesses, and a further 5% of Fremantle community advertising.
I might the CEO had a bit of an alternative way of approaching it, so I might just test that before we go down this path.
Through the chair, thank you. I think if we really wanted to monitor what was being advertised on this sign, I would rather that we ask the applicant to provide a report to us on a semi-regular basis, telling us what they think the percentages are.
So the wording might be the applicant to provide an annual report to demonstrate that a minimum of 5% of the advertising is for businesses on their land, and a further 5% for Fremantle-based community advertising. So I'm sorry if don't ask me to repeat that. I'd be happy to, I don't know, I haven't really done that before, move an amendment to my motion, but to that effect.
Yep. All right. Advice is we can consider it as part of the alt rec, so long as the second is happy with that addition of that clause. All right, let's do it as an amendment. All right, so Councillor Sullivan, you'd like to move part 12 that's on the screen now as an amendment, and seconder for the amendment as printed on the screen. I'm happy to second it. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Councillor Kamada? No, you're just getting your glasses. You can read the amendment. I'll give you a minute. Right. Is there any discussion on the amendment, or am I just going to put it to a vote? Right, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour of the amendment? Councillors, yep, and against? And Councillors Lorber and Mofflin against, so that's carried. So back to the alternative recommendation as amended. I don't want to close. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Yeah, and against? And that's carried. Thanks. Did you get all the? Thank you. All right, that is that item dealt with. So you've got your approval tonight with that additional condition. So probably get in touch with the officers tomorrow if you need to clarify anything. Jokes. That takes us all the way to item 2. Cantonment Street, and I've got Jared O'Brien listed to speak on this item.
You might have to share them 1 for 2. Sorry, I haven't got enough there.
All right.
Thank you for having a look at this. Really, we're not asking you to forgive any public art at all. And this should have been put up properly right from the very start, probably at our era. We're spending about $450,000 putting up to create this building so it looks like what it was originally, which is a brick facade. It's non-structural. It doesn't need to be there. We can eliminate it completely. It does absolutely nothing other than make it look like a wool store. So we no doubt whatsoever we're spending $450,000 instead of, and I think that is what we call our heritage art. We've done a lot of heritage work, and I think that's probably much more appropriate than what we were going to do with the $140,000 artwork. Was just going to be a few mosaic panels, very similar to what we did. We put up 3 poles in the High Street Mall, and that cost us $130,000, and I think it was just a very disappointing outcome. So I just don't want to repeat that process, and so this is not asking for an exemption from the art. It's simply accepting the fact that it is a wool store. We're spending a lot of money on that, and we could quite easily remove that and sure, put up your mosaic panels, but it's not what I really want to do. This whole loss, and I know the officers wrote and said it's nothing to do with economics, but it is to do with economics in a way. 1990, there was a decade in Perth, there was not one development done because it was not profitable.
We don't want to go back to that in Fremantle. We've been talking about spending $1 billion in Fremantle for the last 12 years. And I think if we spend $10 to $20 million is probably the most. If we're going to get some big developments moving Fremantle, things happening, we've got to work as a team. We've all got to start to realise this development's losing $16.4 million. My wife thinks I need a psychiatrist, but anyway. But it is a fact of where we're at, and it has changed dramatically. So there is no profit in development at the moment. But some of these things need to be improved. We need to keep Fremantle. And you look around at some of the stuff I've done, it's pretty damn good. So I think our track record speaks for the fact that we do love heritage and we do things and we do them well. I want to make sure I don't want everything to be all about being legally right. I want it to be about getting outcomes. And this is a way to get an outcome. We've got a big area left over here yet to develop. And I'm not sure what we're going to do it, but these types of meetings tonight have a lot of that. That empathy factor is so important if we're going to create a team. We're also spending a lot more money in the police station on art. We're doing woylies all the way through it, dance chimes and various other things. So, and that's where we do need art because it works. On a boring Coles, I don't think we need a lot of art, and I think the best art that we can put in is the art that I'll propose there. It is hard. Some of the other areas where retail's stronger is making money. You know, we're making money in South Perth, we're making money in Ardross and Applecross. And so there is a lot, and the only difference between the two is the teamwork of what's happening in those areas. So I just encourage us all to just keep working together and not making it completely right, but just working as a team. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, did anyone have any questions for Mr. O'Brien? Councillor Moughlin?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for taking the time to come and speak this evening on the item. Just wanted to clarify the distinction between the public art and the facade of the building. So is your suggestion that if you're required to put in the public art, that the facade of the building will change? What's the the actual connection there?
There's no doubt, Frank, that I've got to try and make this, get it back to a sensible number, and as we're saying, so I'll try and pull that back, but that's not what I want to do. I really should have actually, right from the very beginning, put up what our art is, because this structure, this facade is not needed at all. It does nothing other than my desire to try and create a heritage art. So yes, I would like to probably then come back and say, rightio, because I need to do this in the next few weeks to pull it back off the builder or not, because we're a fair way through it. Thank you.
Councillors, do we have any further? Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, just curious, Jared, the artwork that you're doing in the police station complex, is that part of the public artworks process, of part of that development, or is that something that you're just funding separately?
Yeah, it probably will. I've got UDLA have done it all. I don't find the art process quite good, because 90% of my money ends up going in fees and 10% gets actually developed on the art. I find it quite disappointing, the outcomes, but that's by and by. It is what it is. It's a policy that I try and abide by. But UDLA have managed it. We are meeting with all the people, and then UDLA will use a professional art critic, which is a member of the Art Society, to actually do the whirlies. So there is no doubt that it will form part of the ability, but it'll be many, many times what we are required to spend there.
A further question, if I can. And I'll ask the officers the same question, so seek their comment on it. But if the $140,000 is paid from this site, but was spent on land, as you said, probably is better suited to have genuine public artwork, would that at least soften the scenario?
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought all that through. All I'm saying is I'm spending 3 times this on something that I think is a lot more feasible. I'm spending on brick heritage, which I think is what this building needs. And I know it's a Coles, it probably doesn't need anything. It probably just needs to be a brick or a concrete tilt panel. But sure, I haven't actually started putting pennies in different boxes, no.
that's fine. I mean, obviously this goes to JDAP anyway, so it's a question on notice perhaps. Yeah.
Yes, I just had a question, I think, as well around what potentially else could be on the table here. So I hear where you're coming from about the public art process and the cost of consultancy and stuff associated with that, and that can be challenging. But I also note that Cantonment Street is growing to be an absolutely key street in Fremantle, and that we've got aspirations for that whole precinct to really, show up quite differently to how it shows up at the moment in terms of the urban realm and the quality of the street there. So, I guess hypothetically, if there was a contribution that could be made to that broader public realm above and beyond the required, putting back to footpaths to where they were, etc., is that something that would be considered instead of public art?
Oh, look, I think I'm spending $450,000, and I think I'm going to make the damn thing look fantastic. Hannah, I just don't know how, in this type of building environment, this type of economic environment where no one's building, everyone walks the walk, but everyone talks the talk, but no one's walking the walk. And I think that's going to continue. I just can't keep on saying throw a few more money everywhere. I'd rather seriously do it elsewhere, where I can get stronger retail and make a return. But yeah, look, it's not that I don't want to. If there was a profit in it, it'd be different. But you've just in business, you've just got to draw a line, unfortunately. And I really do emphasise that. I know everyone takes every developer with a grain of salt, and we think you don't tell the truth. But I am telling you the truth, and it would be very nice if everybody in here did some economics with someone totally independent and understood how tough this is, because the next decade is going to be dreadful in Western Australia unless we start working as a team. And if the idea is to belt anyone that you think you get something out of, I pity where our future is, and I pity how we're going to end up with all these old buildings going to look dreadful.
Okay, I'll take it that's a no. Thank you. All right, councillors, any further? All right, we'll go to the debate then. Have I got someone to move the officer's recommendation? Oh, sorry, if the light doesn't go on, then I can't tell what's happening.
Somebody please tell me which page in the agenda the recommendation is.
I'll go to the manager. I think it's not in bold text because of the nature of it being a yeah. I think it's 30? 32, yeah. Yeah. Councillor Archibald, we good now? Okay. All right. So do I have someone to move the officer's recommendation as printed on 32? Councillor Sullivan, seconded by Councillor Williamson-Wong. Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, did you want to open debate or pass?
Yeah, look, I moved it because we need to debate it.
Yes.
And it's also, for me at least, I get 2 bites of the cherry because it goes to JDAP. So to me, this is conversational, not complete decision making. I do have a question which follows on from my questions to Mr. O'Brien, in the sense of if artwork contribution is paid, the location of that artwork, as I understand it, can be typically in the vicinity of where the contribution was made, but doesn't necessarily have to be, and could presumably be located elsewhere. It can be on private land, is my understanding, provided it is genuinely able to be accessible to the broad public. So the question for me is, does the person paying the money get a little bit of reasonable say as to where that artwork money can be spent, so that if it was spent at the other end of Queen Street on their other site, in what is effectively parkland and open space, would that be the type of thing that at least could be discussed with officers? And it doesn't have to be answered immediately because it can be taken on notice for the JDAP. So, but perhaps an initial response.
We will take that on notice for consideration at DAP, but the policy really does look at the contribution, if it is the cash contribution, being given to the city for the city to spend in the public realm, meaning public land. So whether that is for heritage works to heritage buildings or to contribute to the city's public art strategy and rollout. So it would be a street, it would be a park, it would be yeah, that kind of environment, but we can look into that further to see how much flexibility sits in the policy as it's written.
So perhaps a second question while the staff are answering. Just to clarify that the heritage part of the policy was for heritage of buildings in the vicinity, not the heritage of the buildings on site. So it's not about spending money on your own heritage. It's about if there was a small amount of heritage off site, say in the roundabout, fixing that up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Councillor Lorver? Oh, sorry, Councillor Sullivan, did you want to follow on from that?
Yeah, look, I will just finish by, look, I do have a lot of sympathy for the concern at this particular time, but the percent for art is relatively universally applied these days. But I would certainly like to find out a little bit more as to what other local governments are doing with their percent for arts across the thing. I guess the reason being is more about competitive advantage. I do believe that, planning schemes, we do have a responsibility to make sure that that we're as open to development as elsewhere, or that we're not putting impediments to development that other people aren't doing. So between now, perhaps in the JDAP meeting, I'd perhaps try and get a better understanding about whether other local governments, particularly city centre type ones, having a rethink about their percent for art. It doesn't seem to be the case, but certainly information that would be worth considering as a decision maker. The second thing I would say, just in a policy sense, generally speaking, I was never a particularly big fan of having the heritage clause in there. I don't think it should be in there. It's clouded the issue significantly. Percent for art everywhere else is just that. It's percent for art. And it's, I guess, an internationally recognised way of ensuring there is a reasonable contribution to the cultural elements of the city. So it is typically a good policy. Whether it's affordable at the moment, I need to do a bit more research on.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Lorver?
Yeah, just a question, because looking back at the approved plans, it looks very similar to the document that we were given with the facade and all that. And I was just wondering, usually the external treatments are part of a condition on the approval. So are these brickwork and facades conditioned on the original approval? Do we know?
Yeah, I think all the applicant has done is just provide us with a shot of what is approved and what the intention is. I think what the applicant is arguing is that by creating that brick facade, that is the response to the policy, and they're asking for that to be reconsidered through this, the condition to be reconsidered through the DAP application that's before you.
Did you wish to also speak on the item? Did Councillor Mofflin, thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, I suppose just as a follow-up question to that, and I think I know the answer, but to clarify that, is that possible for that to be considered as part of that contribution to public art from a policy perspective?
Through the chair officer's view is no, that's not the intent of the policy.
Councillor Mofflin?
Thank you. And yeah, thanks for the clarification. And yeah, similar to Councillor Sullivan, like I think fully sympathetic in regards to the economics of the build here, and this is a site that absolutely we have wanted to be developed for a long period of time, and the work that has gone into producing what, once it is constructed, a quality site for Fremantle and the development of Cantonment Street as well. It will be a significant contribution to the city, and I wouldn't want to see this particular project being hindered by a contribution for art projects that would mean that it's either delayed significantly or that we get a compromised outcome. So, yeah, not necessarily sure if I support the officer's recommendation in this instance, but particularly because more so around, I think I would like to see a little more exploration around what we might, whether there's the opportunity for contribution to be recognised elsewhere as opposed to being directly assigned to this project. So whether the developer is doing work elsewhere which could be considered as part of the contribution for art, which would cover this site and another, I think is important for us to do. And Councillor Sullivan sitting on JDAP would be great for that consideration to be made.
Councillor Kamada and then Councillor Lang.
Just beat you, Councillor Lang. Look, I'd just like to thank Jared for coming in and really, making it clear the situation from your point of view. I think it's a fantastic thing for Fremantle to have people like yourself who are prepared to invest and also back. You really back the place, and I reckon that's really important. So I appreciate that. And I'm a bit like Councillor Moughlin in that because you've got other developments around the city. So, and I'm just I suppose almost brainstorming like probably the rest of us. Is there a way to respect what you've done and the contribution you've made in other areas as part of this whole picture? I really respect what the policy says and the document here that waiving key planning and development outcomes such as public art on the basis of building cost increases would set an undesirable precedent that may result in the loss of important public art initiatives. And this is why it's important that you came in, the fact that you pointed out what you want to do with that facade is really important, because it's horrible when you get buildings that don't respect the character of the city. So yeah, if there's a way we can work this all out, I just think that it would be nice to be able to look at the bigger picture and support what you're saying. So thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Councillor Kamada. Before I go to Councillor Lang, can I just ask a question of the manager, which was, is there a deadline on this?
There is, but there is time to take it to the second meeting of the month if required, but no further than that. And any further would need the approval of the applicant to extend the time.
Cool. Councillor Lang, thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to thank the applicant for coming in. And as I spoke to Gerard in the foyer, thank him for continuing with development. The only cranes in Fremantle are on your sites. And not going to cover what everyone else has said, which I agree with. I wanted to highlight some other information that Silverleaf's contribution to public art in Fremantle is significant, and it's not being measured. I'm talking about the Plein Air project in Westgate Mall, which was a one-of-a-kind and first-off initiative that they allowed artists to come in and freestyle in a space that doesn't otherwise exist anywhere else in Western Australia. And that's not even being taken into consideration here. So significant contribution to allow a different form of art and a place where people can express themselves when they want. Silverleaf allowed that, and that gave courage for National Storage in North Fremantle to also follow and allow a second freestyle space to exist. So that we can't measure that in dollar terms, but that impact and that canvas being available for artists in Fremantle is very significant. And in addition to that, on this exact site, in fact, prior to demolition, Silverleaf also made other walls available for artists as a blank canvas. There was a really great graphic by international artist that came in and said, welcome to Freo. It was there for a small period. It was a great piece. It's gone. And last week I've noticed there's another art piece, second art piece on the car park that you put up. That's not being measured in this conversation either, but it's art, and Silverleaf are allowing these things to happen on their properties, and that should definitely be taken into account.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. Councillor Graham, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to speak at all tonight, I didn't think. But anyway, look, just looking at this graphic that Mr. O'Brien passed around, I mean, we do not see brickwork anywhere these days. So, you know, anyone who can do brickwork like that, that is a work of art, in my view. And I think what as Councillor Lang said, what Silverleaf's done in Fremantle for the art world and for all the development that it's done, you know, I'm sort of inclined not to support the officer's recommendation on this one. I know it's going to JDAP, so it can be fought by somebody else at another time. But look, I think there's plenty of artwork in what I see on here. We've got bike places, we've got cafe seats. I mean, that's all artwork. And, you know, we only have to walk up to the other end of Queen Street and we've got all the artwork in Walliup Courts. I mean, you know, just how much do we want around some of these places? But anyway, that's just my 2 bobs worth, which I wasn't going to give.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Williamson-Wong.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I love speaking after you because I would like to see art everywhere. No, I think I'm not going to repeat what's been said tonight, but thank you for coming down, Gerard. I guess I'm inclined to support the officer's recommendation tonight, but my key takeaway is really that potentially this policy does need to look at in terms of how effective it is in delivering public art that is making a positive and active impact on people as they walk through Fremantle, because I think it's a great policy to have, and it probably has had an impact. One of my favourite things that our arts director, Pete Stone, has ever said is that we need lots of ways to access art and different levels of accessing art, and I think Fremantle does provide that in terms of our public art and then the programs that are run. But it's possible that this policy does need to look at in how effective it is when we are asking developers to do small-scale projects, which, as you mentioned, High Street, and rating the impacts of those sorts of projects. So that's my 2 cents for the evening.
Thanks, Councillor Williamson-Wong. Councillor Lorber.
I'm thinking that, seeing as we have time for a deferral, and there are some kind of potentially uncaptured things or potential other things to explore, as Councillor Sullivan pointed out, and the things that Councillor Lang brought up that aren't being captured. Perhaps a deferral is the best way to go to see if we can't maybe get a little detail and try to capture some of those alternate ways that this could be done, and also help quantify some of these things that aren't in there, and that might be a good way to go. So, and also give us some time to prepare some text for an alternate recommendation or whatever if we needed to. So, if that's all right, I would like to.
So you'd like to move a deferral, or you're foreshadowing a deferral?
Well, everyone spoke, so I think I'll just have to move it.
Councillor Archibald hasn't. Neither have I. I mean, I'm probably sorry.
I'll just move it and see if we get a seconder. I guess.
Yeah, Councillor Moughlin's happy to second that. We can now debate deferrals, apparently. I don't know that we want to, but perhaps in clarifying the reasons for deferral for the applicant and for ourselves. Councillor Archibald, did you have a comment about the deferral and the reasons
I
for
was
it?
going to just say I would support the deferral, given the comments that have been made in the room tonight, that it would seem that I think most people here are prepared to reconsider the position that we discussed recently. So I do support the deferral. I'm not quite sure how we argue the public art contribution, but if it's deferred, I'll just ask when it'll come back, in 2 weeks, and then go
next
on
meeting. It has to come back next meeting to meet the JDAP deadline.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
On the reasons for deferral, I might just give a couple of thoughts. So the only reason why I would agree to effectively waive the public art contribution, just personally, so I'm testing this a bit, it would not be on the heritage grounds. I'm a bit like Councillor Sullivan. I think the heritage thing is how you, either, anyway, I don't think it belongs in the public art policy, and I think we're a city of artists, so this is art money and development money exist in two completely different paradigms too. So if that money is directly going to art or artists, it's pretty important and pretty huge amounts of money for them. However, I do acknowledge, and I think what I'm hearing councillors acknowledge, is that there are a number of projects that Silverleaf is doing across the city, whether they are development projects, whether they are art projects that are not associated with specifically a development, that potentially we could recognise as a public art contribution. And I would also note that there are still opportunities, particularly around the courthouse and old police complex development, that are probably not fully realised on public land. So there's obviously the conversion of the car park's another one we haven't talked about. The car park as part of the heritage precinct leading up to the prison. But there's also what I would refer to as the dodgy corner at the courthouse that at the moment is adorned with a dodgy bench and a dodgy bin. That's another area where, we could certainly have a look at that and see if that's an opportunity. And then there's the whole car park that adjoins the courthouse development and how that interacts, I guess, with our land. So it feels to me there's a bunch of unrealised opportunities, and I would hope that 2-week period would be where we explore those. If this was done on the grounds of working out, could we recognise that the building's built form is equivalent to a public art contribution, I wouldn't be there for that. So, Councillor Lawver?
Yeah, those would be the reasons that I would move the deferral to allow time to do what you just said.
Yes. See, it's kind of like really efficient, but a bit weird, speaking on a deferral. All right, so if everyone's comfortable with the deferral on those grounds.
Just the one thing that you didn't mention, I just want to make sure is captured, is what was Councillor Sullivan's comments about potentially deferring to another site as well, if we could include that in the reasons so we can look at that.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. All right, so I will put the deferral to a vote. All those in favour? And that appears to be, no, all those against. And Councillor Graham against. So that's carried. All right, so we'll be back in 2 weeks. Excellent. We're through 2 items on our agenda. It brings us to so I'm going to stick with the agenda order. I know we've got some people here for items 5 and 6, but we've also got people here for items 3 and 4. So I am going to stick with the agenda order. And I'm sure we will keep moving pretty quickly. So Joel Nash has already spoken on item 3, which is the microbrewery. Microbrewery. Just getting there. All right. So I'll see if I've got a mover for that one. Councillor Sullivan, and seconded by Councillor Archibald. Do we have any debate on this item, councillors? All right. That was extremely efficient. But you're glad you waited. All those in favour? And against? Noting Councillor Graham's out of the room, that's carried. It's worth waiting for. Okay. That's going to bring us to item 4. I just need to catch up in my agenda. Anyone want to give me the page number for item 4? 64. So we're going to Ainslie Road in North Fremantle. Just to clarify, right down the other end from my mum's house, so no conflicts of interest. And I have got one person listed to speak, which is Sasha Ivanovic. councillors, do we have any questions about this proposal? No, we do not. Not serious ones. There you go. Okay. Missing a couple of councillors now. All right, into the debate. Does anyone want to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Archibald, seconded Councillor Sullivan. Does anyone wish to speak on this one? Ask any questions? Gosh. All right, well, I'll put that one to the vote as well. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. There you go. We do have a quorum. Yeah, sorry, we're just checking we had a quorum. We have a quorum, just to clarify that for absolutely everyone. That was quick and easy. You've got your approval. Conditional approval, as written in the report. Have a chat with the officers tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. So Maxwell Street, number 19. And we've got Emily Gibson to speak on this one. Okay, we've got Emily Gibson to answer any questions on this one. Councillors, did you have any questions on Maxwell Street? Councillor Williamson-Wong, any questions on Maxwell Street? Nope. All right, that makes Emily's life easier. Do we have a mover for the officer's recommendation for conditional approval? Councillor Sullivan. Seconder, Councillor Archibald. Do we have any debate on this item? Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, I just moved it because I almost never get to move a demolition, and I saw that Councillor Graham was out of the room, so I jumped at the opportunity. But yes, it's a good, we're not quite at the stage where these particular houses are worthy of retention. Who knows? Maybe one day we will be. But it's a good response to the site. And I'm not too sure how many cactus plants is going to be planted as part of the overall development, but I'm visualising a few dragon trees and the like. So who knows? But yeah, it's a good outcome. I'm sure the Spencers over the road will be happy as well.
Thank you. Councillors, anything further on this one? Councillor Graham, you missed your opportunity, but you're... Okay. All right, so I'll put this one to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous as well. Making good headway now. That's going to bring us to item 6, which is the scheme, the Freo Alternative Scheme Amendment. I don't believe I have anyone left to speak on this, but maybe I do. Let me go back to my... Helen Trengrove, apologies. Did you wish to speak on this one? Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Mayor and Councillors. I'm Helen Trengrove and I'm a ratepayer. Scheme Amendment 87 is about increasing density in a prescribed area. I see increased density as inevitable, even if I don't like it. But I am here to urge that increased density should not create negative effects that are contrary to the Council's own urban forest plan, which, as you know, aims to increase tree cover to 20% over 10 years. Close to the area covered by Scheme Amendment 87, 2 blocks of flats were permitted on the corner of Coode and Holland Street. This development is a model of canopy loss. A dozen mature eucalypts on the property, which 15 years ago fed about 50 red-tailed black cockatoos, were felled by the owner, which of course is legal. But subsequent council planning decisions allowed new buildings so tightly spaced that the block is now just a mass of car parks and roofs. It was a small urban forest. It is now a very unattractive heat sink, which provides no habitat whatsoever for native birds. The goals of the Council's admirable urban forest plan cannot be met if such dense placement of buildings continues to be allowed. Now, within Scheme Amendment 87, on the corner of Holland and Wilkinson Streets, lies a group of massive mature trees, including a rare baobab, a fig which is similar to a Moreton Bay, and a giant lily-pilly. It is another small urban forest, and the owner can legally fell it when or if increased density is approved. I'm here to urge that the impact of an owner felling yet another block of mature trees for development be met by council with regulations requiring a building plan that leaves space for adequate, appropriate native tree canopy, including verge trees. That section of Holland Street should not become an expanding heat sink devoid of biodiversity.
Thank you, Helen. I'm getting a little bit confused because you wrote yourself down to speak about the Freo alternative, which is relevant to what you're saying, but you were referencing Holland Street, so that was the local planning scheme. I don't think it strictly matters because it's important that you have your say, but was it on the Fremantle Alternative Review or was it on the Holland?
No, I was sent information about scheme Amendment 87. I was invited to speak.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's good. That's good. It's just my confusion because of the location of Holland Street, and the next item relates to Holland Street.
Yeah, it is.
So.
This block that I'm talking about is on the very edge of the amendment, and then the rest of it is further north.
Excellent. Okay, that's cool. I am just checking, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. So we can probably. I don't know if anyone has any questions of Mrs. Trengrove. Ms. Trengrove. If not, I might ask some officer questions, or someone probably will in the debate to highlight what you've raised in terms of canopy, etc.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So we might go into the debate and then we can ask some questions. So can I get a mover, Councillor Sullivan, and a seconder, Councillor Archibald? Did you want to kick us off, or
Yeah,
go to some
I'll
questions?
kick us off, and I acknowledge the words of the speaker, and I absolutely agree with the sentiment. And of course, the difficulty that we have, as we discovered last month, and hopefully when the Councillor Lorva's request for the tree information comes back soon, we may be in a better position. But effectively what 87 does is it tries to deal with the planning system that we had at the time by effectively making sure that infill development didn't spread itself out over so much of the site that there would be no potential for trees. There is a little bit of opportunity to retain existing trees in there, but the main focus was making sure that site coverage and the way in which you do developments and the way in which you do car parking and all of those things produced a better outcome. And it was that was its primary intent, and it's still the primary intent. If we want existing trees to be retained, that's another exercise. But this definitely delivers much better use of land in terms of at least providing space for landscaping. Kind of like you can't lead the horse to water, but at least we're providing the space for the water, and hopefully people plant trees in those spaces. So, do I get the meaning wrong? Did I?
There's no water, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I wanted to ask an officer question, I guess, in terms of just putting on the record one of the key changes that has come through this version of the Freo alternative in relation to the floor plate size. So if I could just get officers to outline, I guess, why that change is recommended and what we might see as being the impact on canopy and other issues that have been raised.
Through the chair. So, the most obvious change that we're recommending as part of this review is to bring the floor area for permitted buildings to 90 square metres down from 120 square metres. A change like that is in order to, in fact, address, I think, the topic that we're discussing right now, which is to enable less site coverage, permit more planting, permit more opportunities for tree canopy and the benefits that come from that. And that change has come through review of consultation and very much, I think, aligns with the initial intent of the policy that was to favour smaller structures and smaller buildings and to permit more landscape areas around those smaller dwellings.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm just going to speak briefly on this one, and I did get implicated by Sally Lowry earlier on in the meeting. When I got elected in 2019, I sort of walked into this new Freo alternative, which I think had only just been the policy in place for not all that long. And at the time, the only two areas was Smith Street, which is next door to Miss Lowry, and around the corner in Montgomery Street. And at the time, I said, look, I wasn't in favour of this policy. It's going to cause loss of amenity. It's going to cause problems with parking. It's going to cause problems with neighbours. And that's exactly what's happened since these two anyway, have been in progress. It's a tricky one for the council. I understand that because it's a balance between urban infill and tree canopies. Do you want more little houses, less trees? Do you want more trees, less little houses? I mean, I don't know. These are the decisions we have to face and conquer. Everyone's got perhaps varying views on that. But as a policy, I don't think it's actually worked perhaps as intended. The next door to, I think it's 11 Smith Street, is, it's a business. These are run businesses, and the people who implemented this are making a fortune out of the FIFOs. They'd be paying huge rents, clogging up the streets and causing, grief for the neighbours. And the one in Montgomery Street, it's certainly done nothing for the streetscape. And we know at the time that I think it's Greenswing, they actually chopped down trees that were identified not to be chopped down and wriggled their way out of that problem, but created other problems with one particular resident that's still an ongoing legal battle now, which would be pretty much in its 5th year. So God knows if anyone can resolve that. But I just don't know whether it's worth having this policy. I mean, with, urban infill policies and everything else has worked well for, 50, 60 years. This one doesn't seem to be working as well. So just out of principle, I will not support it.
Thanks, Councillor Graham. Councillors, any further discussion on this one? If not, I'll put it to a vote. So all those in favour and against, Councillors Graham and Kamada against, and that's carried. All right. Now we are going more specifically to Holland, Carrington and High Street on page 137, the LPS amendment. And I have a speaker on that, and that speaker is Andy Kelly. There we go. We're a bit hasty putting that away. Yeah, you were sitting in the staff corner, to be fair. It really confused people.
Sorry. Staff
That's okay.
I just saw the table and took advantage of it. Hello, councillors. My name's Andy Kelly. I'm here from Development WA. We own 2 of the land parcels as part of this proposed scheme amendment. We're looking to retain all the existing trees and do social and affordable housing there. So, would appreciate your support. Thank you. And happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, maybe hang around for a minute. Councillors, did you have any questions in regard to the proposed scheme amendment? Councillor Sullivan?
Thanks. Yeah, I am basically going to be proposing that the heights on Holland Street be allowed to be R code category C rather than B, noting that that may not be the development height that you want to build to, but believing that it is the development height that would be acceptable in that area. So I'm just alerting you to that and seeking any feedback you might have on that before that happens.
So in terms of that height, what would it be? Because we're only proposing about 4 stories. That would be the
I'm
maximum.
talking on Holland Street, which is area 1, is currently showing up as R-code category B, which is 2 stories, so 9 meters, 7 meters, 8 meters, and 10 meters.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask for an amendment that lifts that
Right.
from that category B to category C in the volume 1, which would take it to 3 stories effectively rather than 2.
Okay.
But that's currently shown all the way along Holland Street as capping out at 2 stories. So
well, we're only proposing 2 stories along Holland Street anyway. So
you
it would
presumably don't have an objection.
No objection to that.
To
no.
it being a higher standard, even if you don't take it up.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
If anything, you can interpret that as our enthusiasm for social, affordable and infill development. Any other questions, councillors? Okay. Obviously, this is an initiation, so we may have more questions later on. All right, thank you, and we'll go to the debate. So do I have someone who would like to move this one? Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Lawver to second it. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, and first of all, apologies, my mea culpa, for reading the wrong document during the discussions this week. So thanks for the staff being kind to me and not and pointing out my error, and also by finding the right document, realising that they'd pretty much done everything that I was hoping they would do anyway. So should have just left it to good faith. Clearly, the sort of scale of development that's been proposed is appropriate for that site, and the type of development, and even the initial site assessment of saying what's important, i.e. the trees and the like. It is actually, other than the high street sort of frontage, it is actually quite a nice precinct in there. The streets are really beautiful with the, a lot of tree canopy and the like. And obviously the sites that face the main roads are challenging sites to do residential development. So it is a good site to perhaps up the ante a little bit and provide different forms of development that are more robust in an environment that faces High Street and Carrington Street. So I certainly recommend it. I will just flag that with those questions that I sent around by email, the manager has suggested that the one that perhaps would be worth changing before it gets advertised is the heights along Holland Street. We can always pull them back, but the problem is if I left that till after the advertising and then tried to put it in, we'd probably have to go through the whole process of advertising again. So it is the only one that I think really does need to change. And essentially that is saying that development along the south side of Holland Street on this site could be 3 stories, not just capped at 2. And the reason being primarily, as I said in my email, would be because there's already development at 2 stories across the road with the block of flats. There is every capacity for development in that whole area to ultimately be 2 stories. So that is the defining character of the future. And that the wide street is also very heavily tree lined, meaning that it's actually going to be quite hard to see development behind the trees. So whether it's 2-story or 3 is not going to make a significant difference. And lastly, if there are taller buildings, if by chance we end up with a 7-story building on the corner or on the High Street side, 3 stories in that Holland Street area will provide more screening to those taller buildings. It provides I think a more realistic stepping from what can be single story at the moment, single and 2 stories, to something that could all be 2 stories ultimately, stepping to 3 stories on this site, and then up to the higher buildings behind. So either happy to move that amendment now, if the staff have some words. It's essentially just probably putting in a clause that says to amend the proposed scheme amendment to allow 3-story development along Holland Street. It's basically changing one word in the actual amendment document, but that's not the way the recommendation is put forward. So,
all right. What I might do is get that drafted up while we go to Councillor Lorver, and then we'll have a read of it and make sure it says what you want it to say, and then we'll go to the amendment. Councillor Lorver.
Yeah, just a question about what's being drafted, and I generally support what Councillor Sullivan is putting forward. You know, I think this is a site where we could potentially do more, but I just wanted to ask the staff if that section that we're potentially changing from 2 to 3 stories, and forgive me, I wanted to make sure I was reading the right plan, but that I thought that was mostly townhouses that's being proposed, and so I'm not. I mean, would we wind up with 3-story townhouses? I guess is what I'm potentially looking at. Or changing that might significantly delay development WA then in actually delivering something there. So just a little bit of feedback on that, making sure I was looking at the right area.
I'll see if I can get the manager to respond to that, or one of them. CEO is just playing interference over here. What about the director? The director like to respond to that one.
Defer that to, sorry, Craig. Is that something that you'd be
We're
happy
going
to?
up, we're going down.
Or to Russell. Apologies.
We'll go to the director. I think it's proper.
Through the chair, there's no minimum height, so it wouldn't be forcing it to 3. It would be based on the economics and what DevWA are looking at doing there. So it would be higher, predominantly higher than other houses in the street, which are predominantly single story on that side. But it would just allow them to explore the idea of going to 3, whether it's a townhouse or some other typology. I think what Councillor Sullivan is trying to do is to just encourage them to think a little denser and a little higher. It could come back as 2-story.
All right, Craig, was there anything you wanted to add to that from the back of the room?
No, I'm in agreement with Russell. I'm actually just drafting a suggested wording though, which I'll email across to Pat.
Great, we'll look for that flying across the room.
Okay.
Okay, while we're getting that amendment up, did any other councillors want to? Councillor Moughlin?
Seems like we've got time to fill, so might as well. Just to add that I'm pretty excited that this has come forward and that we are going to see an opportunity for development in this area, which is sorely wanted in Freo. So yeah, really look forward to it progressing beyond where it is at the moment.
Yeah, I'd probably add my sentiment to that, along with the encouragement that the delivery vehicle for this is well considered, and that, you know, I guess lack of timeliness we've seen on other significant sites, this one doesn't fall victim to as well. You know, we will say to anyone who listens that we're a local government that welcomes social, affordable and infill development done well and done right. I think in dealing with us, you'll know that when we say done well and done right, we're talking about things like the design standards, the sustainability, which would include, I think, things like no gas in new developments, retention of tree canopy, you already alluded to. So you will find no better local government partner than this one, I would say, to do these kind of developments. But we do also, in our community, expects a pretty high standard in terms of being a contemporary developer. Councillor Sullivan, we nearly have something on the screen.
Oh, look, I mean, I don't think it matters all that much, the wording. I would say that actually the actual change in the scheme amendment document would, and Craig will tell me if I'm wrong, but essentially change category B to category C, and it'll just literally be changing B to C, and that'll do it. So it's not that big a change in the document, but this defines what it is. I would only suggest that we just add the words in brackets area 1 after Holland Street, so it's clear that that's the area that we're talking about changing.
Yep. That seems pretty clear and transparent to me.
Yeah, provided Craig's happy with that.
Craig, can we get a...
Yes, that works. Referring to area 1. Oh, sorry, that wording
your
is
version,
intended to
isn't
go in the introductory paragraph of the recommendation. Yeah, I think it would read.
Craig's already added
that way.
what I was talking about, so yeah, that's a more fulsome version. So I'd be happy with that.
Okay, we're going to go the Craig version, and
So
Craig,
you
you
can
have a view about
take
where
the
that
area 1 out of the brackets because it actually specifically says it further on. So I'll move that way.
Hang on, it doesn't make sense now.
Right. And then
I think that first bit goes. So didn't wear my glasses. Badly done.
Yep.
Okay, and is that in the right place, Craig?
I would have suggested it go in the first paragraph, subject to modification as detailed in attachment 2, and modification to amend.
Right, governance advice is telling us otherwise. So we're having a debate now. The intent's pretty straightforward. I suspect we might just go with what's on the screen, if governance is comfortable with that. We are just initiating as well. Look, I like that because I think it's well, I guess when it said 3 stories, it was a bit more transparent, but
so I think Craig is suggesting is that where it says attachment 2 at the top, and F below, probably, so that it's clear that it's...
Actually, I think Councillor Sullivan's got the best way of doing it. If I can just get officers to have a look at that. So if you're just adding and F below, sorry, undo that.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's clear then,
it's
and
clear,
clause F below.
So undo that, just add attachment
where
2.
you are right now, just add
and F
and clause F below.
Below, yeah.
I think
this is called drafting by committee. A lot of people do it for fun. Yep.
And put a bracket after below, and that'll be clear then. Yeah. Clear as mud.
I think we all can see what your amendment is trying to do, so I'm going to put that amendment to a vote. I'll get everyone's attention on the amendment. So the amendment says, and clause F below, and Councillor Lorber, and has the words as written in F, modifications to increase the maximum building height permitted in Area 1 per Category C of the Residential Design Codes of WA. All right, so I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Who was the seconder for your amendment? Or someone over here? Who was the seconder? Okay, Councillor Kamada. Get it in there. All right. So all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Not me too, by the way. All right, so back to the item as amended. All right, no further debate on the item as amended. So I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Excellent. Good-o. Thanks for your patience. All right, that takes us to the end of planning reports, I believe. No, we've got a planning information report. Yeah, I know. All right, so Councillor Sullivan moving the planning information report, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Any debate? Gone. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. All right, so that's taking us to the advertising of the differential rates. Oh, Councillor Sullivan's going. Would someone like to move the advertising of the differential rates, the officer's recommendation? Councillor Graham moving it, Councillor Lawler seconding it. Excellent. So on the diff rates. Yep, who would like to speak on this one? All right, I might just get the Director of City Business to give us a bit of a sort of on the record view about what goes into setting the diff rates in terms of, I guess, where we CPI and then on top of CPI and why we've come up with that figure.
Through the Mayor. So there was a general 5.4% increase on the differential rates compared to last year. That is generally applied across all categories, so it is 5.4% for every single category. 5.4% equates to the current CPI, which is 3.4 plus 2%, noting that we are still carrying some increased costs through contracts that were entered into back in prior years where inflation was much higher and costs were much higher, and we are still carrying those costs. We are also working to increase the renewal program and deliver an increased number of renewal projects to look after our community assets.
And yeah, Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks. Just quickly, I will say that one of the reasons I think we get a lot of pushback from community about the way we sell the rates and the need for rate increases is because we each year kind of market them as if they're specific to a project that we're doing in that upcoming financial year, when in fact the reality is, and we all know that in this chamber, and we've debated it in a 3 or 4 month process of trying to put responsible budgets together, not just for the next financial year, but for the next 4 and next 10 financial years, is that we have a very large amount of projects to deliver, a very high level of expectation from the community that we can deliver those projects, both capital new works and capital renewal, in other words, renewing our assets. And to do that, we genuinely need to have a higher amount of available funds to deliver those projects. And that's what this council has said it would do last year. And it forecast that we would need to do CPI plus 2% rate increases this year, next year, and the following year, I think it is, if we were to be able to deliver the expectations of the community. So we shouldn't be, there shouldn't be a pretense out there that, you raised the rates last year and now you're raising the rates this year higher than CPI. I just want to make it really clear from my perspective that this is essential. If we are going to deliver what the community I know expects of the city to deliver, then we need to do these type of rate increases. And it's not, we don't owe the community a whole bunch of money because we didn't deliver the South Beach toilets on time. We still have to deliver those projects. It actually means that they're piling up, waiting to be delivered, and it just exacerbates the situation. So that's what these rate increases flow from. It's from strategic decision making of this body that has committed itself to delivering those projects. And I'm proud to be a part of a body that takes those hard decisions, because they're not easy, takes those hard decisions and runs with them and gets on with the job.
Very well said. Councillors, any further on these ones or the top? Yep, Councillor Lawler.
I just wanted to thank the staff because I know a lot of hard work has gone into not just this budget, but preparing and delivering all those projects. So really appreciate the work that's gone into getting us to where we are right now.
I guess, you know, I won't repeat what Councillor Sullivan has said, but I think anyone who suggests that we can fix up everything, keep buildings that need fixing up, spend money on new ideas and not put up rates is living in a fantasy world. So this is genuinely necessary for us both to invest in asset renewal, particularly with our high cost heritage assets, and deliver new projects aligned with community expectation. And it will be, as Councillor Sullivan said, for a number of years. Just on the service charge, as the director said in response to the questions, we don't actually need to put that out here as part of the differential rates, but given that we now have an idea of what that service charge might look like for the underground power project, I would say not just in South Fremantle, but in Fremantle brackets south, as in, you know, the area to the southern side of Fremantle. I think the sooner we can get that out there for community understanding, the better. So I appreciate that the work's been done now so that this can go out with the differential rates so people can see it in the context of everything else. So, you know, it's not sneaking it out there. It's actually proactively putting it out there at a time where we have enough information to do so, bearing in mind that we're working with an external party to deliver this project, and you know that brings with it its own timelines and challenges. So yeah, agree the staff have done a great job pulling all that together. Councillors, were there any further conversations, or shall we put this to a vote? Obviously, it's for advertising. All right. So all those in favour and against, and that's carried. Excellent. I think that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. I did miss elected member communication, but nobody shouted out and told me that they had one. So, you know, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yeah, I appreciate I missed deputations, presentations and petitions. That's why you give me prior notice of these things. We have no motions of which previous notice had been given, no urgent business, late items or confidential business. So I will declare the meeting closed at 8:27 p.m. Thank you.